Welcome, ladies, back to another episode of S.O.C.S, Sisters Open to Christ, Kindred Spirit. Today, I am elated to share with you someone who I have just been blessed to get to know a little bit more, and I think you will feel the same. Tanya Gioni. Say it.
Gioia.
Gioia. I love that last name. Say it again.
Gioia. So it'd be Joya phonetically spelled.
Gioia.
Yeah.
I like that. I like it better than the way I pronounced it. That's for sure.
That's pretty normal, though.
Yeah, I bet. Well, Tanya knows that for every addict, there's at least 5 people that are impacted. And she works with women to heal a generation, which I think is phenomenal. She's been through all the challenges you might be familiar with, like striving for a career, chasing a man for fulfillment, been there, done that multiple times, managing children, and an addicted husband, and her own codependency to running a business thinking money would save her. Finally, she came to the realization she deserved more. So she set out to educate herself through AA, through Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, and Deep Therapy EMDR. I am also very familiar with that as well. It's good stuff. Tanya now works with women who want to finally heal their marriage and family while supporting their husbands through recovery. She uses her Grace and Recovery framework to help women become cherished by their husbands and their children by pacing God and love first to create the family dynamic we all desire. She's also the host of Sober on Purpose podcast. Welcome, Tanya. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Trisha, thank you. I'm glad we could do this. And I am just in love with the S.O.C.S, walking on the word, standing on the word. There have been plenty of times. So the silliest thing that I think I've done is there have been plenty of times where I've put my checkbook underneath my feet when we all had checkbooks. And I said, God, I need you to be the one who manages all this. I'm not doing it because I do have a streak of retail therapy and Amazon makes that really easy, right? So put the checkbook.
That can become another addiction.
Oh, man, don't call me out like that, Trisha. Now I have to go deal with it somewhere, right? Come on.
Very relatable, Tanya, very relatable. It's either sugar or Amazon for me. One of the two. Those are my two real clinchers.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Trisha. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
I'm excited to have you, Tanya. All right. So let's get started with some fun questions. This podcast is, of course, dedicated to supporting Christian women who desire to have a deeper connection with Christ. Can you share with the listeners how you can possibly help them move just one step closer to a deeper relationship with Jesus?
Absolutely. So I just learned this not too long ago, and I've been working in this field for a long time. We have a response that is fight, flight, or freeze, right? Did you know there's a fourth one? It's called fix. So what I do with women is if their response is any of these, we work on all of those, but most of the women I work with, to keep themselves safe, they go into fix-it mode. And just the realization that you're in fix-it mode can change everything. So the phrase that I often hear is, if they would just, if he would just, if she would just. When that phrase comes out, you're on the wrong side of the fence because you're trying to boundary somebody into responsibility. You're trying to set it up and control it so they will do what you perceive as the responsible thing. So when we look at the fixer, there's two things that happen. If I have identified myself, whether consciously or subconsciously, as a fixer, and my person decides that they are going to take the steps to get healthy, that they are going to take the steps to do what needs to be done to live their life in a whole Christ-centered way, then guess what, Trisha? I'm out of a job. Right? I'm out of a job. Who am I in the relationship? That's why marriages break up after sobriety, not before, because before sobriety, I have a job. I have a job to do. So the other piece of that is if that person decides not to get healthy and I keep doing my job, just like many of us, we get tired of our job. We get weary of our job. We're exhausted by our job. And we're like, please, God, help me. So we're in this catch-22 of, if they do what we've been asking them to do, then we're like, okay, now we're jobless. What do we do? If they don't do it, we get so weary we can't do the job anymore. We've set ourselves up for failure. So what I
Yes.
help women recognize is that they have needs, and it's okay to have needs, that Christ himself had needs. He had
Sure.
needs. He had needs for food. He had
Sure.
needs to be alone with the Father. He had needs to know that he was loved and cared about, which came from the Father primarily. So that is one of the main things we work on. All of that to say, what is your identity? What is your identity in Christ? Because if I
Yeah.
have been a fixer for long enough, and it may have started in childhood where I had the parent, if I've been a fixer for long enough, I've forgotten who I am. I'm
Mm.
basically wearing the same pants as the person I'm trying to fix. I don't know where my pants are. I've forgotten if
Yeah.
I like chicken or fish. I've
Yep.
forgotten to go to the doctor for the last 5 years. I will just get over it if my feelings get hurt instead of saying, hey, that really hurt. We need to do something a little bit different. So those are the big transformational things. And you and I both know I don't do that. I show the way to that, and God
Yep.
fills in.
Amen. Yeah, as you were talking about the word fixer, I am a fixer by nature. I would say over the course of my failed relationships, I was very codependent, and I prefaced it in a way as such that it was very biblical what I was doing because I am a helper.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what God's called me to do. I'm supposed to help. So anytime I'm trying to help, quote unquote, help, and I end up finding myself becoming more and more agitated, and when it's not going the way I think it should go. And so I've learned over the years, if I am seeking God first in that role, right? So I want to fix this for you, but I need to ask God if I should do it.
Amen.
So I start
Amen.
there, which is like, okay, God, help me. Because right now I feel like I need to fix this. And I want to help because God's called me to be a helper, but I also don't want to step over that boundary that should be there. I mean, there genuinely should be boundaries with regards to the codependency aspect of a relationship, especially with someone who is trying so hard to overcome an addiction.
Absolutely.
So I am definitely on the same page with you on that.
Well,
What does the concept of emotional sobriety mean to you, and how does it differ from traditional sobriety?
thank
Tanya?
you for asking that, because I've
You're
really been
welcome.
working on that this year. And this was coined by Bill W. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're a friend of Bill W., you've been in the AA world, you will
Mm-hmm.
know this, but very few people know this. Emotional sobriety is the ability to maturely monitor yourself and your emotions. We
Mm.
all have the ability to get dysregulated, but to recognize I'm dysregulated and go do what I need to do to re-regulate myself. Now,
Amen.
here's what happens to the codependent. This is such a crazy circle. If I'm taking care of you because I perceive that's my job, I'm the fixer. And if you're not happy, then I'm not happy. So it's my job
Mm-hmm.
to make you happy. So then when I get dysregulated, instead of getting emotionally sober myself, right, going and do what I need to do to be regulated, I'm either going to lash out because
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
my job's not going well, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and fix you even more because I perceive that will fix me. Neither
Mm.
one of those are good options for emotional regulation, for emotional
Nice.
sobriety. So
Yes.
as we step into emotional sobriety, we recognize this is really hard. We recognize that how life is going, yes, things will impact us, but our attitude and our response versus our reaction is completely our responsibility as an adult. Now, children, there's a little caveat in there because they don't have as much choice. But as an adult, we have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a first world country, we have choices of how we do this. But let me bring this really home. So there's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl that's had a resurgence. He was a psychologist that got taken to the concentration camp. And
Mm-hmm.
what he said was, as he was doing this work in his mind, because he had no tools while he was there, he said the only thing that a person really has control over is their attitude and their responses. And he's working with a group of people that everything has been taken from them. And he said the
Mhm.
ones that survived were the ones that made choices on how they were going to respond and how they were going to interact with not only their people in the concentration camp, but the guards, all those types of things. So if you bring that into our world, and well, when we say, this is a frustrating phrase for me, when we say, well, I'm just like that, or I was raised that way, or this
Oh,
is how I perceive the world, I want to look at you and say, okay, that's going to give you what you've always gotten if you
yes.
stay working in that way. You
Yes.
have the opportunity. You're not stuck in a concentration camp. You have the opportunity to change your thoughts, your thought patterns, and your attitude around that. Because what does Jesus say? Take all your thoughts captive. Think on what is good and what is noble and what is true. Let me caveat that we still have to look at fact and impact. If
Yes.
you are in an abusive relationship, if you are being the abusive person in the relationship, because codependence can be that too,
Sure.
then you need to look at the fact and what the impact is and decide if that's the impact you want to continue having in your life, because you have
Yes.
that choice.
Yes. Beautiful answer. Really awesome. I typically get like super excited and have all these like comebacks, but I mean, you covered pretty much everything there. That was beautiful. Do you have any practical tips you can offer for cultivating that emotional sobriety? And
So here's the thing, and I love that you asked that.
yeah.
One of the things, we know this from anything, we have to realize there's a problem. So if here's what we often don't want to recognize. If people are responding to me in a way I don't like, I have responsibility for that.
Yes.
Okay? So the practical tip is to say, okay, get with God, get with some prayer time. How would I like to be responded to? Who are the people in my life who are not responding in the way that I either feel comfortable with or I feel loved and valued around? What does that look like? So we have to decide what it is that's missing. We can't go looking for something that isn't missing. And when we look at the fruits of the Spirit, we look at love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, self-control. There is no law against this. We need to look at, okay, how do I want to be responded to? So I have a very practical example in my life of the world has changed significantly on where swear words are acceptable. I mean, enormously.
Yes.
So if I am doing something where I'm going to be a part of it for quite some time, if I understand that people use them as commonalities now, and if I'm crossing the grocery store, I'm not going to stop and waggle my finger at somebody in the grocery store. That's not my business, right?
Yeah.
But if we are in relationship and this is part of your language, I may look at you and say, hey, this is really uncomfortable for me. I realize it's part of how you communicate, and maybe this isn't a good space for us to be in. I just want to get your opinion on that. Would it be okay? Because let me tell you what it does for me. It totally sidetracks me. I've stopped listening to you. I'm over here dealing with how I feel about this word. I can't give you the full attention that you deserve. I am just off over here.
Yeah.
So that's me saying, this is how I want to be treated. That's me being a very emotionally sober and saying, hey, I struggle to give you the attention that I know you deserve when this kind of language is being used. I'm not condemning you for using the language. Use it all you want. The question is, do you want my attention in a full attentive way? Because it throws me off. So there's a practical example, but the real key is in identity and values. What do I value? Where is my identity? And man, Trisha, we can get so muddled on, well, I've done this and I shouldn't expect that and blah, blah, blah. No, Christ says, hey, you are made whole. You are made in my image. I am breathing you right now. So you have not because you've asked not. Well, a lot of times we don't even know what to ask. But these are, our understanding of how to set ourselves up so that we can have emotional sobriety starts with us. It's not the other person. So the second tip is the great pause. And that's what I am really still working on is I'm not ready, fire, aim. I'm fire.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
don't
was
do
about to say that's
ready.
me too. I got it. I got like an arsenal. Man, I could just whip
Yes.
it out like
I'm
a
like, boom, boom, boom.
boom.
Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go.
Yeah.
So these things that might have served me once upon a time, I'm realizing are no longer serving me.
Mm-hmm.
So to pause, this is so key.
Yeah.
When you feel triggered, when you feel like, oh, I need to take care of it, or, oh, this isn't going to go right without me, or, oh, I've got to make sure this goes okay. That is the time, or if he would just, if she would just, that is the time to pause and check in with your belly button. And I
Breathe.
say that literally because what's happening is your nervous system has just lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And when your nervous system lights up, we're back into fight, flight, freeze, or fix because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. So if we check in with our nervous system, we can begin to calm ourselves down. And I learned this really simple technique. If you take a couple fingers and just press above your belly button, even if you want to do it right now, Trisha,
All right.
all those
I'm there.
listening, do you feel it calming your vagus nerve? You're kind of feeling this trickle down, and it's just a gentle press.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
can
I
remember
got
to
a pretty
do
big belly
that,
button, so I probably need 3 fingers, but
yeah. However you want to do it, that gentle press and 3 deep breaths will give you enough of a pause. You can do it even if you're standing in front of your teenager trying to handle something, standing in front of a shop clerk trying to handle something.
Yeah.
Nobody will know.
Right.
And you've got the opportunity to not be just fire, but to
Yeah.
actually get ready. So those are some quick things about emotional sobriety. One, really take some time and journal out. When I do get triggered, how would I like to be treated? Because you get to rewrite your own narrative.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
then when you're in the moment to do that double finger, 3 finger belly press and take 3 breaths, we'll give you a minute. Most people will just look at you and they'll stop because you've stopped. They're going to mirror you. So it gives everybody a minute. I mean, Trisha, how many times have you been in a conversation where when you walked away from that conversation or the heated conversation, you thought, that was so stupid. I don't even care about that dish. In fact, they could have thrown that dish away.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have cared about it.
The coulda, shoulda, wouldas that you have after the fact, those conversations you have in your head, you could completely divert yourself from ever needing to have those conversations if you just do that one practical tip of pausing and really thinking about it. And as a shoot from the hip kind of person, I can completely understand the need for that. I didn't in my younger years so much, but as I've gotten older and really started to dive into understanding myself better,
right,
which is kind of also a really important aspect, which it seems like you've done a great job of doing that with yourself. You know, once you get to that place of really understanding you are, it makes it easier for you to be better for others, you know.
absolutely.
And when you're serving and loving on someone who is in a place of, you know, addiction or struggling with their own identity and their own issues, it's really easy to become, I wouldn't use the word judgmental, but more of an authoritarian in the relationship, because you feel like you're way high, I'm better because I am not like that. And you know, if you just take the time to you know, do the 3 fingers 3-second rule, I think that would make a lot of sense for a lot of people, including me. So I will definitely make an effort to attempt that. I've learned over the years that regulating my own emotions prior to speaking is also like a pivotal. I've always been a talker. I mean, we're on podcasts, right? So we like to talk. I mean, that's just kind of what, I don't know anybody who gets on a podcast and says, yeah, I don't like talking. I mean, that's not, you know, it's not. But at the same time, learning to be an active listener,
right,
to what the person is trying to convey to you, and not making it about self.
yes,
For me, is something that I have gained over many mistakes and many years of really self-discovery and trying to find ways to be a better version of myself, not only for my loved ones, but for God, more importantly, because I feel like I want to be this example of God, right? I want people to see me and say, oh, she's got some Jesus. Well,
Yes.
you're not gonna give off that vibe if you're shooting from the hip all the time, because there are the hip comes a lot for me, and it's like when it comes from the hip, it's usually pretty worldly versus godly, because I am, I'm a sinful, carnal natured person, right? As we all are. So it's easy for us to take it the degree of self, and go that direction instead of stopping, pausing, and ultimately when you're taking those breaths, kind of be asking God, hey, help me to make sure I say the right thing.
What a great prayer. And that's something I encourage everybody. So Annie Lamont, who has some wonderful books out there, one of hers is Help, Thank You, Wow. So she considers those the base prayers. And certainly while you are pressing the belly button, you can be saying, help. Because what I don't want to do, Trisha, is spend my life apologizing.
Right.
Once I've fired on somebody, God will often convict me, not condemn me, because we're no longer condemned because we're daughters of Christ, but convict me and say, you didn't behave super well over there. Will you go back and apologize?
Oh yeah.
And I do, because I want that relationship above all else, my relationship with Christ. We need to go forgive somebody before we can go to the altar, and I want to be at the altar every day. I do. And I'm like, I don't want to spend my life apologizing. So if slowing down and pausing allows me to, like you said, reach out in love rather than in self-protection, then I'm in a better space. Because when I'm reaching out in self-protection, I've stopped hearing you. I've stopped seeing you as a full human being. I'm just trying to protect myself from whatever's going on. And I'm not saying there's not a time where you need to draw a boundary and protect yourself. I would say most of the time, if we stopped and paused, we wouldn't have the issue afterward.
Yes. Yeah. I am 100% agreement with that. All right. So if you're listening right now, and today is the launch day of this episode, Tanya and I are happy to say Happy New Year to everyone, because today is January 1st of 2025. And I wanted to ask you, I know, right? Crazy to think that that's where we're going to be here in no time at all.
Those are like Star Trek numbers. Do you remember when Star Trek used to say 20 something something? I'm like, we'll never get there. My kids are graduated in 2023 and 2026. I'm like, okay.
It just overnight. I was talking to a family member the other day, and I was like, I really thought it'd be more like the Jetsons by now.
Absolutely.
I was so ready to be able to push a button and food just pop out exactly the way I wanted it.
Why is that not
microwave
happening?
close.
Why is that not happening?
I know. Why am I not flying around in little cool planes? That would be fun too.
I love it. I love it.
So since today is the first day of a new year, I would love for you to share with everybody how we can start the new year sober-minded in our faith in Jesus, and that all things will come to those that are called according to our purpose in those times we don't really feel emotionally strong. Because that is going to happen this year, ladies.
Yes, and it will. So that's where I'm coming more and more to getting in the Word. I mean, people say this over and over again, but that getting in the Word, and let me tell you a really simple way to do it. Most of you have libraries that have apps, and you can download it. You can download the Bible on your app, and so you're preparing the kiddos' lunch, you're going for a walk, you're doing something like that. I've been in James, 1st and 2nd Peter, and then 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John for probably the last 2 months. And James, he greets everybody, and then he says, count it all joy when you have trials and tribulations, because this is maturing you. I'm paraphrasing, but get whatever you want.
You're pretty darn close there.
and this is maturing you. This is bringing you into the communion with Christ, because you're no longer, as Paul says, we're not to be babies. We're not just to keep doing milk. We need to be able to count it all joy. And
Mhm.
it is really interesting that some days I will be coming up the steps, I'll be walking the dog, I'm raising 2 teenagers right now, and I'll be muttering, count it all joy, count it all joy, count
Yeah,
it all joy.
gotta tell
So
yourself that.
yes, and that's what I would say is, as we're moving into 2025, as we're moving into, another year, is where are you in the word? And here's something really interesting. If I asked you about your favorite TV show, you could probably tell me what the theme song was, right?
Sure,
I
sure.
used to use
You could tell me.
Gilligan's Island, but we're all getting too old for Gilligan's Island. We could use Friends, that type of thing. But you didn't sit there and you didn't take a pencil and a paper and sit in front of that and go, I'm going to get the lyrics to this song. I'm going to know the tune to this song. You just heard it
Sure.
repetitively enough that you began to really soak in it.
Mhm.
How do we soak in the word the same way? I'm extremely auditory, hence the podcast. So soaking in the word for me is, I haven't memorized James from beginning to end, but I can give you an overview of it because I just keep listening to it. I just keep listening to it.
Yes.
And that's what I would encourage people to do. Is it's simple to get, it's easy to do, and it will bring you into that fullness of God. So let me give you a little story. We just did a summit called the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, Where is God in the Midst of Addiction? And one of the people that I interviewed, Amy Edwards, go check her out. She's Joy on the other side. She said, we're doing the interview. And I said, so what was it that got you to stop drinking? Well, the first thing was, she said, I don't want to treat people like I treat people when I've been drinking. And I don't want to be known as the drinking couple. So she had an
Mhm.
identity thing
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as she was doing what in this kind of gray area they call the quit literature, the stuff that says stop for 21 days, see how you feel. Stop for
Mhm.
30 days, see how you feel. It's not the full blown, I'm going to AA. It's a little different than that.
Yeah.
She said, I started reading my Bible. And I swear, Trisha, a light bulb went off on her head. She hadn't really put the 2 and 2 together. She'd always been a Christian. She'd always been in church. She was singing in choir hungover, right? But
Mhm.
she did the quit challenge. It was a challenge online at the same time that she was picking up her Bible. And she said, oh, that must have been what made it work this time. That must have been what the beginning of the identity shift was.
Mhm.
To say,
Mhm.
I'm not this drinking person. We're not a drinking couple. I don't do this as
Yeah.
my identity, because she had identified herself that way. She's reading the Bible and she's being held as this beloved child of God, this woman who was knit together in her mother's womb, that God knew from the beginning, that God planned her days. She was picking up that identity rather than, I'm a fun person when I'm drinking and we go out every Friday, Saturday night and drink, and I show up to choir hungover.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that shift. That's what we work on in the Grace and Recovery Framework. That's what we work on in prayers for your husband, for women dealing with partners that are struggling with addiction. We work on that identity shift
Yeah.
because that's what we're missing. If we're a
Yes.
fixer, we're
Yes.
asking the world to provide for us what only God can provide. And we're
Yeah.
basically saying to God, I don't trust you that you're going to meet my needs, so I'm going to go out and find a place to get them met.
Right. And the first thing that came into my mind was replacement. It was just a one word that came to me as you were saying that, because you really do need to replace one with the other. When you have something in your life that is pulling you away from your relationship with God, which clearly addiction does that, because you are addicted. Becomes an idol over God.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can replace that addiction for Jesus in some way, shape, or form, and using the Bible is, of course, the best way to go about that. That I would say probably in conjunction with prayer, the two of them can certainly revamp your entire direction. That is super awesome. I am so grateful that you said that. Also, in the way that you did, I was terrified, since it is 1/1/25, that you were going to say start reading the Bible in a year, and I was going to go,
Nope.
oh, stop.
Nope.
Please
So,
don't do
so
that.
I'm ADHD and dyslexic, hence the audio reading. I mean, I can read, but that audio coming in, if you think about it, the Bible was always an oral tradition. So in a way, we're
Yes.
going back to our roots. It's an oral
Yes.
tradition. And I really want to speak to the people in the audience who are still at, well, if they cleaned up their addiction, then my life would be okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not how it happens.
No, ma'am.
And we can look at the righteous older brother in my favorite parable, because when the prodigal comes home, the father welcomes him with open arms. And then he goes to the righteous older brother and he says, hey, come down. We're having a feast. Your brother's alive. He's not dead. All these things are going on. And the righteous older brother says, hey, I've done everything you've asked me to do. You owe me. You owe me big time, and you've never done anything like this for me, and I'm left out here in the cold. I cannot rejoice with you. That person is often who the person becomes when the husband gets sober. They're like, he got to go away for
Wow.
30 days, 60, 90 days. Why don't I get to do that? I'm still holding the bag. Why am I
Yeah.
not getting a respite? Why is this person not coming home and just fawning all over me? They are as much out of sync with God as the person who is doing whatever addictive behavior that is.
Yes.
And they are trying to save that person, which means if the wife's voice is so loud in the husband's ear that he can't hear God, he's missing it. So even if you're listening to this and saying, well, I don't have an addiction, I don't need that, read that parable. Really look
Yeah.
deeply at who the righteous older brother is. Are you missing God? You're going to church, you're teaching Sunday school, you're raising your kids well, you're doing a lot of things well, but are you missing God because you're doing the more legalistic thing rather than doing the love piece of it? And rather than saying, God, you are sovereign and I need to be under you, rather than trying to be you.
Beautiful. That was great, Tanya. Thank you so much for that. That really sunk in for me. I appreciate that. And I'm sure it sunk in for others as well. Last fun question I got for you, which is another one I ask everybody. And if you're new to this podcast, you may not know this, but each episode has its own purchasable socks. So last fun question, Tanya. What Bible verse will be on the bottom of your socks and why? Because
Hope
we're going to be standing on the Word of God.
Yes, absolutely, which I am just loving. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but hope
Beautiful.
fulfilled is the tree of life. Because we get into this setup of what could be called toxic hope. We're hoping for things that God is not in. Just like with the righteous older brother, the father is saying, come, join us, be loved on, be cared about, be with us. But we've got our own guidelines of how this should look and how this should happen. So oftentimes, even when the good happens, we're blinded to it. So to gain that tree of life, we have to look at the hope that the Father has put in us, not the hope that we'd like to have this, we'd like it to work out this way. The Father may be working it in a way that we can't see yet. But if we stand on that promise that we don't hope for things that are seen, we hope for things that are unseen.
Yes.
And we know that He has a plan, even in the darkest hours, even in the times where we can't see it, can't remember a blessing we've ever had, and we just like to pull the covers over our head and say, okay, God, I'm done. Take me home.
Yeah.
We're finished.
Yeah.
God still has it. So I want you to stand on that hope, but I want you to stand on the hope of the tree of life.
Yes.
Not what you have created for yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. All right. So share everybody how they can find you.
So you can find me at tanyagioia.com, TANYAGIOIA.com. And then Sober on Purpose is my podcast, Sober on Purpose on Instagram, Sober on Purpose on Facebook. There's a TikTok channel, but it's just a play channel. So you can find me over there. And I would love to support you, talk with you, and say, you know what? There is a good plan for you. even if you're in some really dark places right now, there's a good plan for you, and you are not powerless. Now, how AA has set it up is you are powerless over another person, but guess
Yes.
what? You contribute to what's going on, and you can either contribute positively or negatively. So your power comes from how you choose to pause. We're back to the 3 fingers in the belly button, and how your attitude shadows on the people that you love and care about.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much. I have enjoyed you immensely, and I'm sure everyone else will have as well.
This
For
is
those
so
of you
fun.
that don't know this, and this is new, so this is like a big whoo-hoo eye opener. This week, starting January, we're going into winter socks. So the socks are going to be a little bit different. Tanya's going to be bringing the new socks out for winter socks. So that is going to be a little bit larger, not so tennis shoey, more booty. So that's exciting. So
That's
I'm
awesome.
excited. I'm excited for you to be my first boot sock.
Sweet.
So,
Can I put him in my ski boots?
heck yeah, they should be big enough. Right on. You can be skiing in
Yes,
January.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm up here in Colorado. That is one of my favorite pastimes, to
I can
be
see why it would be.
out among God's trees and, the beautiful snow and the landscape. It's wonderful.
I'm a little envious. We just got just cold here. No real.
That
Just
is the
gets
difference
closer.
with Colorado.
Yeah.
320 days of sun, and everybody gets outside. It's this
Yeah.
whole culture shock for me,
Yeah, I
but
bet.
it's
I
been
bet.
marvelous.
Very cool. Thanks again, Tanya.
You are more than welcome.